Keefe D said he told Rat James that, look, it's big money in this. Only thing Puffy want to do is pay $1 million to have both of them killed. He told me that.
Duane Keefe D. Davis will stand trial again in a new hearing for the assassination of Tupac Shakur in less than 3 weeks. He remains the only person ever charged in a 30-year-old case that has never stopped generating new theories and new names. But the man about to face a jury did not spend those decades in silence. He spent them talking, through a memoir, in interviews, and in detailed proffer sessions with police, building a public narrative that placed himself at the scene while pointing toward a much larger target. Those words are now the prosecution's entire case. Which means Keefe D walks into court trapped by his own voice. And his only way out may be to force the man his stories have always circled, Sean Diddy Combs, to take the stand and explain himself under oath.
They don't want, if they was in any of those freak-off tapes, if they played a part in any of those Diddy sessions, they don't want it to get out to the general public to make up their brand. That's why a lot of those rappers...
The trap is not complicated. Keefe D gave hours of recorded statements to investigators in 2008 and 2009. He sat for interviews with journalists. He wrote a book. In every version, he described the shooting, named the people in the car, and claimed that Diddy had offered a $1 million bounty for the assassinations of Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight. He was not a bystander in these stories. He was a participant. The self-described on-site commander who helped orchestrate the hit. Now that he is the defendant, prosecutors do not need witnesses or new evidence. They have his own tapes. They have his own book. They can simply play his voice back to the jury and let him convict himself. The contradiction could not be more dangerous for the man in the courtroom. To win, Keefe D has to convince 12 people that the story he told for 20 years was never actually true. His defense team has already signaled their move. The allegations against Diddy were exaggerated, a bid for fame, a performance for book sales and documentary cameras. But that argument forces him into a paradox. If he lied about Diddy, why should anyone trust anything else he said? If he told the truth about Diddy, then he has admitted to a homicide-for-hire scheme that makes him far more than just a witness. This is where Diddy becomes the unresolved variable that keeps the case unstable. Keefe D's lawyers are reportedly exploring the possibility of calling the imprisoned mogul to testify. The logic is simple and brutal. If Diddy takes the stand and denies under oath that he ever offered money for Tupac Shakur's death, it supports the defense argument that Keefe D's stories were fabrications. If Diddy refuses to testify, or says something that does not match the old allegations, the case only becomes stranger. Either way, Diddy becomes the pivot. And because he is already serving a 50-month sentence on unrelated convictions, he is accessible in federal custody, facing his own calculation about whether silence or cooperation serves him better.
As far as, is he going to turn people in? Is he going to cooperate? If the federal government wants him to cooperate, and they're going to cut his time, because right now he's looking at 15 to life. With all the charges he had to, he won't get out till 70 years old. He about 70. That's when they start talking about letting him come to a halfway house.
None of this means Diddy is charged with anything related to Tupac Shakur's assassination. Las Vegas authorities have repeatedly stated that he is not a suspect, and no official document names him as such. But the courtroom does not need to charge him to put him in the witness chair. Keefe D's defense can argue that the only person who can truly verify, or dismantle, the old allegations is the man at the center of them. That argument alone could be enough to force a subpoena. And once a witness is under oath in a homicide trial, the questions get specific, fast. They get specific about meetings, about money, and about who said what to whom in 1996. What gives this moment real weight is that it is no longer abstract. The trial date is locked in. The clock is running. And the man whose stories have fueled documentaries, YouTube breakdowns, And 30 years of speculation now has to sit in a courtroom and watch those stories become exhibits against him. The prosecution does not need to find new witnesses or dig up fresh evidence. They have Keefe D's own voice, preserved on tape and in print, describing how the shooting happened, who was in the car, and who he claims ordered it. That is not a weak case. That is a case built from the defendant's own mouth. The pressure expands because this case has never been only about one man or one night. Tupac Shakur's death carries the weight of an entire era, a rivalry that seemed to claim two of the biggest names in hip-hop within 6 months. The notorious B.I.G. was killed in March 1997, his case still unsolved. The Quad Studios shooting in 1994, where Tupac Shakur was robbed and shot 5 times, remains a wound he himself blamed on people close to Diddy. The names and narratives have been tangled together for so long that separating them now feels almost impossible. And that tangle is exactly what a courtroom oath can begin to unravel.
3 law firms on retainer. I don't know how much money is coming in, but I know that a lot of money is going out every single month for Diddy.
So when Keefe D's lawyers talk about putting Diddy on the stand, they are not proposing a legal maneuver in isolation. They are opening a door that has remained shut for 30 years. If Diddy testifies, he does so under penalty of perjury. If he answers questions about the alleged bounty, about Eric Von Zip, and about the meetings Keefe D described, those answers become part of the permanent record. They can be compared to old interviews, old lawsuits, and past statements from other figures who have spoken over the years. They can be measured against what Kirk Burroughs wrote in his 30 boxes of journals, against what former LAPD detectives have said, and against what Suge Knight has claimed from prison. The instability deepens because Diddy is not the only name circulating. Suge Knight, sitting in a California prison, has been giving interviews that introduce new accusations every few months. He has claimed that Snoop Dogg was trying to bail out Keefe D because he is worried about what might be revealed. He has also claimed that Tupac Shakur and Snoop Dogg nearly came to blows days before the shooting. None of these claims are proven. Most come from a man with every reason to deflect and nothing to lose. But they exist. They are public. And they ensure that the story surrounding this trial continues generating new friction points, pulling more people into its orbit. The result is a legal moment that feels larger than a single defendant in a single courtroom. Keefe D is trapped. His own words are the evidence. His own voice will be played for the jury. But the trial does not exist in isolation. It sits at the center of a web that includes Diddy in federal custody, Suge Knight in state prison, Snoop Dogg responding to accusations on social media, and a Netflix documentary series that compiled it all for a global audience in December. The case was supposed to be about one man's accountability for a 30-year-old shooting. Instead, it has become the pressure point where all those separate threads converge.
2 days before he died, I don't think he liked me.
Why?
Because we was in New York.
Oh, yeah.
That convergence is what makes the question of Diddy's testimony so volatile. If he stays silent, the trial proceeds with Keefe D's words as the central evidence, without any counterweight from the man those words implicate. If he testifies, everything changes. He steps into a proceeding where the questions are not controlled by his legal team. He answers under oath about events that happened when he was 30 years old, at the height of a rivalry that consumed the culture. And once he starts answering, the comparisons begin. His words will be placed alongside Keefe D's statements, alongside Kirk Burroughs' journals, and alongside investigative files that have followed this case for decades. The trial date is set for April, and it is already close. That is not a distant deadline. That is just weeks away. And the man who may hold the key to the most unexpected outcome is sitting in a cell, deciding whether silence or testimony is the less dangerous option. His decision will not just affect his own future. It will determine whether this trial remains a contained legal proceeding, or becomes the first time a central figure in hip-hop's darkest mystery is forced to answer under oath. That is the turning point. Not a promise that it will happen. Not a conclusion about what the truth is. Just the clear, unstable reality that the pressure is building toward a moment where someone has to speak.
The boy Puffy called me, though. Puffy called me back in the day. He called me. He was like, "I just want you to know I ain't have nothing to do with your brothers. You know, I know who you are, but we never met. And I just want to call you man to man, let you know that I ain't have nothing to do with your brothers." Now, why was he calling me, reaching out to me?
Kirk Burroughs still has the journals, 30 boxes of them, filled with the kind of details only someone inside the room would think to record. He was there when Bad Boy Entertainment evolved from an idea into a machine. A co-founder who watched the money move, contracts get signed, and relationships shift in real time. The pages document everything. Car rentals in August 1996. Budget approvals. Conversations that seemed routine at the time, but now read differently. They are not legal evidence. No court has tested them, but they exist. And in a case built on memory and allegation, a paper trail written 30 years ago carries its own weight. One entry describes vehicles requested for a trip from New York to Las Vegas for a boxing match. The timing falls just days before September 7th. Kirk Burroughs noted the expense, arranged the rentals, and moved on. He did not know what the cars were for. He simply recorded it, because that was his job. Now those pages sit alongside other documents, timelines, and accounts that investigators have spent decades trying to align. The timing does not prove anything, but it adds another layer to the question of who knew what, and when.
There was a great deal of documents that were taken. In Mr. Wilson's initial press conference, he had stated that our client is presumed innocent, and that's obviously a constitutional protection that every defendant enjoys. However, he had said that just recently they had come upon evidence that they felt basically corroborated their theory of the case, and he had made reference to this.
The funeral details surfaced in the documentary series, and it hit hard because it was so specific. After the notorious B.I.G. was killed in March 1997, Sean Diddy Combs organized a public memorial that drew cameras and condolences from around the world. What the public did not know, according to Kirk Burroughs, was that the cost of that funeral was charged back to Christopher Wallace's estate. In other words, the rapper's family paid for the spectacle. Kirk Burroughs also claims he was asked to alter Christopher Wallace's contract after his death to make the terms more favorable to the label. He refused. Within 90 days, he was fired. The lawsuits that followed went nowhere. Kirk Burroughs spent years largely outside the spotlight, while the machine he helped build continued to run. But the journals remained, stored away, waiting for a moment when someone would finally ask to see them. That moment came when a documentary team reached out. Now those pages are being read by an audience that did not exist when they were written. And the timing matters. Because the man at the center of those pages, Diddy, is no longer in a position to fully control the narrative.
There's going to be a number of motions filed. There'll be a motion to suppress filed promptly. That concerns the search warrant that was executed on his residence. That search warrant contained a nighttime clause, which is curious. You've got a case that's nearly 30 years old, yet you have this 24-hour nighttime search, this 24-hour authorization. So that's the first of several motions that we anticipate.
Sean Diddy Combs sits in federal custody, 50 months into a sentence that has already changed how he is perceived. The infrastructure that protected him for decades, the lawyers, publicists, and influencers who could be deployed to shape any narrative, does not function the same way from inside a cell. He can still issue statements, and he has, but those denials land differently now, competing against 30 boxes of documents, a documentary series, and a trial date that keeps getting closer. The power dynamic has inverted. The people who once had reasons to stay silent no longer have those same incentives. That inversion is why whispers of a possible deal have taken on a life they never had before. The logic is simple. Even if confirmation is not there, Diddy still has time left to serve. He faces civil litigation that will continue regardless of his criminal case. And the Keefe D trial creates a moment where information about 1996 has real value. If he knows something, if he has anything to say that could clarify or complicate the narrative, now may be the only leverage he has left. That does not mean a deal exists. It means the conditions for one are in place.
You gotta realize, Big was that type of rapper that he could get at somebody, and I think Puff was trying to tell him, don't go that route. You understand what I'm saying? But still putting out songs like Who Shot Ya in the intro, but telling Big not to go at nobody, which was crazy.
The pressure radiates outward from that possibility in ways that reach people who are not defendants in the case. Suge Knight watches from a California prison, continuing to give interviews that add new layers to the story. He has claimed that Snoop Dogg was trying to bail out Keefe D due to concerns about what might be revealed. He has also claimed that Ray J told him that Snoop Dogg bragged about being involved in funding the shooting. He has described tension between Tupac Shakur and Snoop Dogg in the days before Las Vegas. An argument at a hotel, a refusal to travel on the same plane. None of this is verified. All of it comes from a man with a long history of animosity towards Snoop Dogg, and every reason to deflect attention from himself. But it still enters the public conversation. Snoop Dogg's response was brief and public. He posted a message for everyone to see. His remark about owning Death Row Records served as a reminder that Suge Knight no longer controls the label he built, and that the power dynamic has shifted in ways unrelated to 1996. It was an effective dismissal. But it did not erase the accusation. It simply added another layer to the ongoing narrative. Another piece of content in the endless cycle of commentary surrounding the trial. Their feud is old. But it continues to generate new attention because the underlying question never disappears.
That boy life is dangerous. His life is and he's just not dangerous with the they said he's doing, but he's in danger. He knows too much.
That question, what really happened, hangs over every new development. A lawsuit filed by Steve Otis after Diddy was already in custody alleges a threat made years earlier that referenced Tupac Shakur's name as a warning. The plaintiff claims he was told that if Diddy could arrange what happened in Las Vegas, he could arrange anything. The lawsuit is untested. The allegations are unproven. But the fact that it exists, that someone felt safe enough to file it only after Diddy was behind bars, reflects how the landscape has shifted. Fear tends to recede when the source of that fear loses power. The geometry of this situation is unusual because none of these individuals are defendants in the case. Snoop Dogg is not charged. Suge Knight is not a prosecution witness. Kirk Burroughs has a civil lawsuit, not a subpoena. Steve Otis has filed a complaint, not secured a conviction. Yet all of them now form part of the atmosphere surrounding the case. And that atmosphere shapes perception, even before jurors step into the courtroom. The trial itself will take place in a controlled environment governed by rules of evidence and cross-examination. But the pressure surrounding it exists everywhere else. In interviews, social media posts, and comment sections that keep these names circulating.
The reason we asked everyone to be here today is obviously we are the new attorneys for Duane Davis in the Tupac case, now set for trial February of next year. The reason in particular that we asked the media to be here is that
that circulation changes what a potential testimony from Combs would actually mean. If he takes the stand,
that circulation changes what a potential testimony from Diddy would actually mean. If he takes the stand, he does not just answer questions about the alleged bounty. He answers for a broader pattern that multiple people have described over decades. A pattern that connects the car rentals, to the funeral expenses, to contract disputes, to lawsuits, to alleged threats. He answers for the cumulative weight of all these accounts. None of them prove anything on their own. But together, they create a context where denial must work harder. The jury will hear the official evidence. But they have also lived in the same media environment as everyone else. The focus still returns to Keefe D, but now through a wider lens. His own words remain the central evidence. The tapes will still be played. The book will still be quoted. But the trial is no longer only about whether he was in the car, or whether he pulled the trigger. It is about whether the story he told for 20 years is true. And if it is, what that means for everyone whose name appears around it. This is where 3 decades of speculation collide with the rules of evidence. What happens if Diddy testifies and denies everything? What happens if he confirms parts of the allegations? What happens if Suge Knight's next interview surfaces just before jury deliberations? These are not hypothetical questions. They are real variables that could shape the outcome. Will this trial close a chapter, or open a much larger one? The answers are only weeks away, and no one knows which version of history will withstand the oath.
He's saying that, Diddy, he put a hit out on you and Tupac, and that's the reason why Tupac got in Vegas. So, yeah, man. How you feel about that?
Well, first thing first. I mean, that conversation been out there. He put his truth out there. A lot of other people put their truth out there.
He's saying, did you put a hit out on him and Tupac Shakur? Is that why Tupac was killed in Las Vegas? So yeah, how do you feel about that? Well, first of all, that conversation has been out there. He put his truth out there. A lot of other people have put their truth out there. And that is where the story stands. The man charged with the shooting, Keefe D, built his own trap through interviews and book deals. The man who may hold the key to that trap, Diddy, sits in a cell, deciding whether silence still serves him. And everyone else, those who documented it in journals, spoke about it in prison interviews, or filed lawsuits after the power shifted, is now waiting to see what happens when testimony begins. What do you think Diddy would say if he had to answer these questions under oath? Do you believe Keefe D's story will hold up in court? Leave a comment with your thoughts.